With new big tier shifts, of course, you can always expect the tiering council to look at the new drops and potentially ban problematic elements. And this drop was no different. We see 4 new bans. Flamigo, Meloetta, Delphox, and Zoroark are all now banned from Indian. We're going to talk about that today. Of course, before I get into that, I will give you all a reminder if you have been enjoying the content. Daily uploads since I think the generation started, at least for NU's sake. Hey, subscribe. I'm not going anywhere, so stick around for the ride. But I'll first talk about my votes, because as you can see, my slate vote does not match what happened. I banned 4 things. Did not get this one correct. Salazzle. So I'll talk about why I voted to ban Salazzle real quick, because then I can just, segue into this. I'll also mention why these were on the slate to begin with, of course, because I think that's good for transparency's sake. Always good to let everyone know, hey, why was this even being voted on in the first place? So, Salazzle ban. Why did I say Salazzle needed to be banned? Well, I believe Salazzle has far too many tools to get past its checks. I think the limiting factor for Salazzle will always be the bulk, and something I pointed out specifically to Eternally was I think being two-shot by Rotombo's Volt Switch is a pretty big, issue, particularly comparing it to Delphox, which only takes about 40 from a Volt Switch. That difference in damage is pretty significant when you're talking about trying to outplay Salazzle. And, you just need easier thresholds to meet as well to get rid of it and make sure that you don't get run down by a nasty plot, maybe even Subtoxic if you were to run into that, or just any generic utility set. But the reason I still vote to ban it is I felt defensive counterplay was far too shaky, and offensive counterplay gets a little bit dicey as well, given Salazzle's speed tier. You're very reliant on having Scarfers to take out Lazzle. I mean, yes, Mo 2 shots. Passimian will OHKO with EQ. Paladin Tauros will do the same. You even got Flamigo if you were running Scarf on that. Bravebird could deal with that. Meloetta, we have a lot of Scarfers. But I'll always mention this. I think when Scarfers are what you are relying on too much to check something, it gets a bit dicey. And, thankfully we've got Jolteon and Hisuian Electrode too. Neither of these mons have to run Scarf to be super fast, and they both very, very easily revenge kill Lazzle due to the bulk. But I think the way it warps defensive counterplay to being so shaky is kind of toxic for the metagame. And speaking of toxic, having moves such as Toxic, Knockoff, Encore, you just disrupt the flow of those bulkier teams to such an obscene degree that I don't feel like it's very healthy, while still retaining a really good matchup against offense, because you have, Encore, you can prevent these setup supers from running roughshod over your team. You have the speed, and you're really strong, so a lot of these offensive foes, unless they're speed boosting, they ain't faster than you. You can just Encore them, and you don't care about, they're never beating you. They're getting locked into, Calm Mind or Bulk Up or Belly, whatever move. It just, the pressure it exerts in a game feels really, really, really overbearing. And if you want to look at specifically the defensive counterplay to it, what walls them on, well, you've got, Knuckle Stack and Colossal would be the 2 mentioned, because they're rock types, so resist the dual stab. And yeah, I am knocking either of those Pokemon, and they are turned into setup fodder. Nasty Plot just lets me get past them much easier later on in the game. And that's particularly the point with Knuckle Stack, because Cole is, it's fully evolved, it has real stats. Knuckle Stack does not. As you saw in the Salazzle video we did, if you didn't watch that video, go watch it. You just 2-shot Knuckle Stack at +2 if you get rid of the Eviolite. So that's pretty, it's pretty fun. Mod just doesn't check you at all, so yeah, good work. I will fully admit, Salazzle is a mon that requires you to make a bit slower of progress with it, and I think that's the big reason you only saw me and Togki as the 2 people voting to ban it. It's not a mon that is an insta-win mon. I feel like people looked at Flamigo and Meloetta and Delphox as mons that were a bit more instant with their impact on a game. Because with Delphox, you just had to Nasty Plot. And from there, you could generally just start throwing off attacks. Maybe you have to Terrastalize to cover for your defensive typing. But generally, very straightforward. Meloetta, you just had to attack. Specs was insane. And in something like Flamigo, you just had to attack. Choice Band was insane. That's probably where you saw the difference in Salazzle voting come from, but I don't know. Right now, it seemed like a mon that it would be better off to deal with just through banning and revisiting, in my view, but I'm happy to be proven wrong, because it is always good to have these fast utility Pokemon in a metagame. So, we'll see where it goes. Now we'll talk about the mons that just didn't get banned that I also voted not to ban. We see Hariyama on here, and Hariyama's a Pokemon that we already do see a lot of people saying, make sure to keep an eye on it. It's got some very potent sets that could snowball the metagame quite hard. In particular, of course, we gotta talk about Belly Drum Hariyama. That set is very, very dangerous. Thankfully, there are a lot of Pokemon faster than it. And by faster than it, I mean, that's not really saying much. Hariyama's base speed's like 50. Instead, I should probably say this. There are a lot of Pokemon that even when Hariyama boosts to +6 and terastallizes with Terra Steel, they still aren't KO'd by Bullet Punch and can one-shot Yama in return. So I think that keeps the counterplay pretty consistent. And in addition to that, it's not like I have a ton of different options to check Yama with. Like, you're gonna be able to tell pretty quickly on a team, based on the team, whether it's like Belly Drum or Assault Vest or Guts or like Bulk Up Spadef. So it's not dynamic in the sense that it can just run any set on any team, like maybe Zoroark would get credence for, but rather it has a lot of sets, but for the most part, they are very, very team-specific, and at times archetype-specific. You're probably not running Belly Drum Hariyama outside of, say, a very offensive build, for example. You're probably not going to run any of the other sets like Assault Vest or, you know, Bulk Up Leftovers outside of a more balancy or bulkier build. And Guts, kind of the same deal, where you're probably going to run it on something like a balanced build with a lot of pivot support, get it in, activate that Flame Orb, just throwing off CCs, knocks, facades, etc. So I think that helps with the counterplay. It makes it a little bit less doomed. I mean, an interesting comparison, of course, will be something like Blastoise, where people felt it was a bit insta-win, where you just find a turn to Shell Smash and win. Yama doesn't feel the same way, and I think part of that's because Yama does not try to hacks its way to victory. I'll still down the hill, of course. I don't think Blastoise was ever particularly good in Sword Shield NU. I think the ban votes were very unjustified, and they were reactionary to how Blastoise won games. Blastoise is a very toxic Pokemon. I mean, you want to talk about Salazzle as a toxic person? Now Blastoise. Because that mon was flinching you to beat you, and it was using a move that, again, double your speed, double your special attack. Like, that is very scary to deal with, and it's very tilting to lose, when oftentimes what that mon would do to win was not even 2-hit KO your Pokemon. No, it 3-hit KO them, and it would flinch you twice. Like, you kind of got that going on, but I don't feel like Hariyama's got the same thing going for it, at least not with the Belly Drum set. Meanwhile, you look at the other sets, I mean, I don't view Guts Hariyama as particularly toxic for the tier to deal with. I think it is a reasonable mon. It's something that has to trade HP to try and wall break, but it's also very, very slow. And right now we're talking about Guts, of course. And since it's so slow, you've got a lot of offensive counterplay, because, I mean, even the walls that Hariyama is tasked with breaking through are going to be faster than it and can take it down. Meanwhile, something like Assault Vest, I mean, that's not any world beater set, that's just a nice defensive presence to have. It gives you a very cool, what we call a tank in competitive Pokemon, where you've got that mixture of offense and defense in one slot, but Goodra could also be considered a tank. I mean, I just like having that around for the tier. You get a nice check to things like Pyroar, even Zoroark, of course, pre-ban. Goodra, you check that pretty well. Rotom-Mow, you could at least stave off some attacks from. If you run Guts on AV, you could also switch into a Will-O-Wisp, which is cool. It's just a nice presence to have all around. I mean, hell, check Salazzle, too. Look at that. I just like Bulk Up with, like, Drain Punch, knockoff Bullet Punch. I've seen people also worry about that a bit. Give it comparisons to some of the bulky setup sweepers of the previous metagame. Talk about like your Sandacondas, your Dunsparces, your Electrosses, and I think those concerns are valid, but they haven't really shown that they're overbearing yet. And it's kind of silly to say that, because how many tournament games do we actually have showcasing? I'm looking at a stack with some of y'all. There are people trolling in this World Cup tournament we got going on. Like, they are straight up not taking it seriously at all. And I don't mean that inflammatory, but I mean it as just an objective observer who's not playing in the tournament. You are seeing people use teams that are from the previous metagame. So, I don't know. You tell me how seriously you think these people are taking the tournament when they don't use new meta teams. Anyhow, that just goes to say, there's not a great amount of games that have been played in this new meta. And so it is a bit hard maybe to see the impact of such a set. You know, you got ladder to go off of, which, I mean, we got, what, a week since the initial bans, you know, we did with Inteleon Toxtricity, Dreadnought. And in tournaments, I mean, we've had 2 tournament series for the ladder tour playoffs. And then, yeah, we have a week of World Cup where there are some very unserious players. So the sample size isn't great, is what I'm getting at. But I do believe that there is at least enough potential for Yama to start looking questionable going forward to where we should keep a very close eye on it. And yeah, Primeape's next, and I'm shocked that this mon got more than 1 ban vote. We had known there was going to be 1 person voting ban on everything. Slice voting ban on it is a little curious in my view, especially since they then voted do not ban on Zoroark. And Lazzle and Yama, like, that just... I might ask him about this because that's a very interesting ban slate in my view. But Primeape is a weird case because Rage Fist is, I don't want to call it a broken move, but it is a very strong move. Being able to pivot your mon into just random U-turns or other weak attacks and slowly get stronger and stronger is such a scary concept. But I think what ends up giving Primeape issues, and why I didn't end up voting ban, is how frail it is even with Eviolite. Like, don't get me wrong, Eviolite gives you at least enough bulk to be obnoxious. But I don't feel like its strengths are being fairly stated by some of the pro ban people. I feel like people just say, oh, the spawn just, you know, you just have to play well and it BS's its way past teams. Like, I think that's a really reductionist way to look at the mon. And I think it ignores a lot of the issues Primeape has. For example, compare it to Annihilate, the, you know, other relevant Pokemon that got banned in large part due to Rage Fist. Primeape does not have initial stab on Rage Fist, meaning if you are not Terra Ghosting, that move is not going to be as strong as you'd like it to be. In addition, it means if you are not running Terra Ghost, period, you know, maybe you want to try Terra Water or Steel, you are just never getting stab. And while it's not like it takes a ton of attacks to get to a good attack stat, you know, every move increases the base power by 50, it starts at 50, so after, like, you know, 3 straight U-turns or something, you're at 200. It kind of ignores, too, the issue Primeape has, which is how frail it still is, and how it's reliant on a Violite to get its bulk. And in even, like, a third lesser point, it wants speed, so less bulk invest. But let's talk about those first 2 points. Reliance on a Violite means that you do not have leftovers. And that's pretty important, because something like Annihilate was able to run lefties and stave off those U-turns and maybe like Pex's Surfs far more easily. Because you actually get health back every turn guaranteed. Primeape has to throw off Drain Punches if it wants to actually get that health back. Or, you know, get past Wishes from, say, Umbreon or, you know, Delphox pre-ban. It just increases the reliance on team support so much, and makes it a much harder mon to play too, because of course you're not holding boots either. So you are taking Hazard Chip, and this tier has, you know, especially in the meta we voted on, Quillfish was an incredibly dominant Pokemon. So Spikes were on like every team. And that just, again, furthers the issue of, wow, I am always weak. I don't know, it just, I did a video with it. It felt like it was like a veritably good Pokemon. There were some people saying they don't feel like it was very good at all. I don't know if I'd go that far. But definitely not, in my view, was worth ban voting at all, so it just kind of was off my radar entirely. Now, of course, here I continue my crusade against banning Zoroark. I don't know, right now I voted do not ban because I didn't feel like Roark, outside of its core with Flamigo, was very, like, potent. I had not seen a Zoroark looking very dominant, unless it was getting every illusion play correct. And even when it got illusion plays correct, several instances I'm seeing this mon just fail to do significant damage when it's making correct reads. That's really the most I can give you. It's very fragile. The speed is far less pronounced in this metagame because we have a lot more fast Pokemon too, so it's got fewer turns to safely break. There are more speed ties it has to deal with as well. And as I was mentioning, yeah, it just does not OHKO or 2-hit KO nearly as many Pokemon as you'd like it to. And that's something that I have mentioned time after time again. Yes, as offensive Pokemon get stronger, Zoroark gets stronger, because its teammates are far better. However, guess what? As defensive Pokemon get better, Zoroark becomes far worse because you do not punish people nearly as effectively when they don't get the illusion play correct. I mean, that's all I can say. Yeah, congrats, you predicted me right. You don't even two-shot me, so I now know that you are Zoroark. I can, adjust. It's not like I find out you're Zoroark, but not after being shown out, oh yeah, I'm about to be two-shot if I stand. That's just not the case. So I don't know. It also helps, and I mean, I'm not a terastallizing stan, so, it hurts me to give it any credit. However, I will say, it does help that you could also have a fairy type on literally any team you choose to. Also, Terra Dark, we've seen a ton because of these two guys right here, frankly. Who knows if that ticks down now, but, we're talking about the meta we just voted bans on, so it's worth mentioning. Which also just helps for counterplay, because, yeah, the teams could just have Zoro checks. Whenever. So I don't know. I don't think this was the meta to ban Rark. And like I mentioned too, I believe that a lot of its potency came from being paired with Flamigo, and that Flamigo was really the presence exerting itself over, the tier, over matchups, because yeah, I see a Flamigo, I'm definitely scared because this Mon two-shots everything in the tier with Brave Bird or CC. So yeah. Well, I mentioned this, I was talking to Finch. I believe, you can talk about not wanting to speculate future metas. How about I just say this? Flamigo is the problem, because if I lose a 50-50 to this mod, it's like, yeah, Zoroark can do some stupid stuff, but I'm only forced into that because of how potent Flamigo is. Anyhow, let's talk about the mons that were actually banned now, which is probably what most of y'all were here for the video. So if you got 17 minutes just about into this video, congrats. You now get to learn why we banned Flamigo, Delphox, and Meloetta. And I guess you also get to learn why we voted ban on Zoroark, because at the end of the day, it really was just a matter of people felt the illusion mind game stuff was super duper pronounced, particularly due to this pairing with it in Flamigo, but also Delphox and Lazzle. Those knockoff mix sets were, like, really good. So, there you go. There's your ban reasoning. It also helps to be a dark type in a psychic-dominated meta. So, let's talk about Flamigo. Now, I'm going to say a phrase, and that will be the extent to what I say about Flamigo. Scrappy, close combat. That's really it. I mean, you think about how in the previous NU, before we got the tier shifts, Terra Ghost Sandaconda was a super duper relevant check to every fighting type. Hazel and Toxicroak being the two, relevant ones here. And yeah, you can't do that when Flamigo just two-shots you as you Terra Ghost. I mean, the checks to Flamigo ended up coming down to, like, Quillfish and Driftblim, both of which were two-shot by Brave Bird. Now, Brave Birding a Driftblim, of course, sucks because you take so much recoil. However, it's not the end of the world if you get rid of the Driftblim and then still have enough HP to CC later. Or can get a Wish Pass even from an Umbreon, mind you. Mon, the Mon had speed issues for sure. It sits at a super congested speed spot, and the ties with Meloetta were just dire to deal with. But I mean, yeah, it basically two-shot the entire tier with way too much speed to justify letting a Mon do that. Meloetta's ban comes down to a mix of things, but really, it just is too strong. Like, sometimes a ban reason for a Pokemon is not that deep, and I think that's with Meloetta. The Mon is just too good for NU standards. 600 BST, it's incredibly fast for a Mon that is as bulky and strong as it is. Really, the only flaw to Meloetta is, like, its physical bulk not being the best. But again, you talk about how terastallizing helps out some Mons a lot. I believe Meloetta is a particularly good example of this, where many of the physical attackers that you would have to try and revenge kill a Meloetta end up becoming shakier if you get terastallized on. I think, like, again, Zoroark would be a great example here. Because if you try to revenge kill Meloetta with, like, a knockoff, well, if I Terra Fairy on you, you just don't revenge kill me anymore. So with, like, Flamigo wants to be CCing. Well, if I get Terra Fighting done, not fighting, if I get Terra Fairyed on, even if I go for, like, Terra Fighting CC, well, that sucks. And then, of course, we could talk about set versatility, too. I mean, that just plays into why Meloetta was so dominant. Past its stats, letting it stat check everything. You got Scarf, you got Specs, CM, even Assault Vest was a really, really good set. I mean, I'd really just say that at the end of the day, Spec Psyshock did not have enough counterplay. I did Delphox the last ban. I believe Delphox is also a bit much for the tier because really you plotted up and then not much was stopping you. Even choice sets were quite good. You'll see a trend. Pokemon that learn Psyshock are quite strong right now. Because many of the checks to special attackers end up getting floored by it. But Plot Fox, I mean, the checks to it end up being one, offensive pressure. Try not let Delphox set up. It's not the bulkiest mon ever, and although it's quite fast, you still have a decent pool of revenge killers to it. And then the defensive typing also leaving it vulnerable to plenty of other types of attackers, like, Croak Sucker Punch even, or Zoroark Sucker. And then you do have to plot to actually be, like, super threatening. You still have mons that are switching into you and checking you decently if you don't get the plot. Like, Goodra can, Blissey can, Knackle Stack even can, Colossal can. But I think the gripe ends up coming with, like, yeah, I mean, Fox does get the plot, you have to play that Terramine game. And how strong Fox is kinda just made the opportunity cost to Terra feel less, important. You don't feel, it's not like it's detrimental to burn your Terra with this mon and maybe not have it for later. Because it lets you make so much progress. And oftentimes, I mean, terrestrializing with Fox is just good anyway, because yeah, becoming, say, a fairy type, it gives you a lot of extra leverage around these matchups. That's it for this. I hope y'all enjoyed. Of course, since we banned out 4 Pokemon, these will be eligible for a revote later on. In a couple months, you should expect these to get revisited because, yeah, I mean, there's no sense keeping them banned for, however long until we get DLC 1 and 2 shifts. So hope y'all enjoyed this. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on this council slate, anything else you believe that we didn't vote on that maybe needs to be looked at. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.